For years, Barron Trump had stayed out of the spotlight, carefully avoiding the media's sharp gaze. But tonight, he was about to face a series of questions that could change everything. As one of the most respected hosts, Eleanor Chase, dug deep into his life, Barron's calm demeanor only made the tension grow. Every word she spoke seemed designed to provoke, but he wasn't cracking. Instead, he was turning the tables, giving answers no one saw coming. What did Barron really think about his father's legacy? Was he stepping into the political arena? The moment Barron spoke, America's jaw dropped. His response to one simple question would leave the entire nation stunned. The stage was set inside the colossal glass-walled conference hall at the International Forum. The bright lights flickered, cameras whirred, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The air hummed with an electric charge as the world watched from every corner of the globe. Tonight, it wasn't just any ordinary debate, it was a pivotal moment in political discourse, one that promised to break the usual mold of interviews. And at the center of this spectacle was Barron Trump, the quiet figure who had spent years out of the spotlight, known more for his silence than any political declarations. Tonight, however, he was stepping into the limelight, ready to break free from the shadows of his name. Seated across from him was Eleanor Chase, one of the sharpest interviewers in the media industry. Known for her ruthless questioning and ability to dissect her subjects, Eleanor had faced off with some of the biggest political figures in the world. But tonight, she was not prepared for the level of calm and control Barron would bring to the table. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, with an unshaken composure that seemed to command the room, Barron was poised for what would surely be a historic moment. As the lights dimmed and the audience quieted, Eleanor adjusted her microphone, her eyes never leaving Barron. The weight of the moment was palpable. She leaned in, her voice cutting through the silence, setting the tone for what was to come. Eleanor's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a challenge wrapped in curiosity. "Mr. Trump, this is a rare moment for you. You've kept a distance from the spotlight for years. Why step into it now?" There it was. The first question, aimed at Barron's decision to finally break his silence. The world had long speculated about his future, but no one had expected this. Barron met her gaze evenly, his expression unreadable. His response came slowly, but each word was deliberate, chosen with precision. "Everything has its time, Eleanor," Barron replied, his voice unwavering. "And this is the time." His words, simple yet powerful, echoed through the hall. The tension that had filled the room before seemed to dissipate. It wasn't arrogance in his tone, but a quiet assurance that Barron was in control of the narrative. He wasn't someone who acted on impulse or reaction, he was here to present himself on his terms. Eleanor, not easily thrown off balance, leaned back slightly, taking a moment to process the gravity of his words. Barron wasn't just stepping into the spotlight, he was choosing to be there, and that made all the difference. Eleanor had expected him to be tentative, perhaps even defensive. Instead, she was confronted by a young man who had clearly been observing and waiting for this very moment. Eleanor's challenge, "But beyond the name, who are you?" With a slight nod, Eleanor pressed on. "People know your name, they recognize the power it carries. But beyond that name, who are you?" She had hit the heart of the question, the one Barron had spent years sidestepping. Beyond the Trump legacy, beyond the wealth and influence, who was Barron Trump? The crowd held its breath, waiting for his answer. Barron paused for a moment. His eyes flickered briefly, but his expression never changed. "I'm someone who chooses my path, not because of my name, but because of the steps I take," he said. The weight of his answer hung in the air like a challenge, not just to Eleanor, but to everyone listening. Barron wasn't just defending his identity, he was asserting it. He wasn't running from his family legacy, he was standing in it, owning it, and pushing forward with his own choices. Eleanor's brow furrowed slightly. She could see that Barron wasn't going to be an easy target. There was no defensiveness in his words, just a steady confidence that made her question her own line of questioning. He wasn't hiding behind his name, he was using it as a stepping stone to define himself. Eleanor, now more determined than ever, pressed forward. But many would argue that your legacy has shaped your every step. After all, you didn't start from scratch. You inherited power, influence, and wealth. How do you reconcile that with the idea of truly defining yourself? She had laid the trap, a question designed to force Barron into either acknowledging his privilege or distancing himself from it. The crowd was still, anticipating Barron's response. The room was filled with a quiet buzz, as everyone waited to see how he would navigate this loaded question. Barron's eyes remained steady, his voice unshaken. A name can open doors, yes. But it's up to the person to walk through them. I've had opportunities, but it's my actions that will define my path, not where I started. A murmur ran through the crowd. Barron had sidestepped the trap with ease. He wasn't denying his legacy, but he wasn't going to let it define him either. The message was clear: actions speak louder than inheritance. He wasn't here to defend his birthright, he was here to prove his worth through what he accomplished on his own terms. Eleanor's expression shifted, a slight nod of recognition passing through her features. She had expected to expose Barron's sense of entitlement, but instead, she had found a man who was more interested in creating his own legacy than relying on his family's. But Eleanor wasn't finished. She knew the question everyone wanted answered. The room held its breath as she leaned in, her voice now soft but carrying an undeniable weight. You've spent most of your life watching the media, observing the power structures. Do you see yourself as the person to disrupt them? This was it. The question that could change everything. Would Barron Trump step into the world of politics, or would he remain on the sidelines, continuing to watch from afar? The pressure on him to follow in his father's footsteps was immense, and Eleanor knew it. She had already positioned herself to catch him in a moment of indecision or uncertainty. Barron's response came quickly, his eyes never leaving hers. People should decide that for themselves. I'm not here to tell anyone what to think. I'm here to show them what's possible. It was a masterstroke. Barron had not only answered the question but had flipped it on its head. He wasn't interested in telling people what to believe or how to think. He was here to present a new vision, a vision that didn't rely on traditional political structures. He wasn't promising to disrupt the system, he was showing that there was another way forward. The crowd was stunned. Eleanor, despite her skill and experience, was momentarily taken aback. She had expected Barron to concede or back down, but instead, he had taken control of the narrative. The interview was no longer about him defending his place in the world, it was about him defining it. Eleanor pressed on, sensing that the interview was taking a direction she hadn't anticipated. You've made your presence known now, but the question remains, are you planning to enter politics? After all, the pressure to follow your family's footsteps is immense. Can you truly avoid it? The question hung in the air. Was Barron ready to step into politics, or was this all just a media spectacle? Eleanor wasn't looking for a simple answer. She wanted Barron to commit, to admit that he was indeed considering the path his family had walked for decades. Barron paused, just for a moment. The briefest flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but it disappeared just as quickly. Then, in his calm, measured voice, he answered, I don't intend to follow anyone's footsteps. But if the time comes and it's necessary, I won't shy away from it either. It's not about who you're related to, it's about the work you put in and the change you can create. The room was electric with anticipation. Barron had done it again. He had taken a question meant to trap him and turned it into a statement of his own beliefs. This wasn't about legacy or family, it was about action, about what you could do in the here and now. Eleanor, still trying to regain her footing, asked the final question. So, Barron, if America came to you and asked you to lead, would you say yes? It was the question that had been hanging over the entire interview. Would Barron Trump step into the political arena, or would he continue to shape the world from the sidelines? The tension in the room reached its peak. All eyes were on Barron as he paused, as if contemplating the weight of the question. Finally, Barron smiled. It wasn't a smirk or a grin. It was a smile that conveyed confidence, resolve, and a deep understanding of the moment. "The real question isn't whether I would say yes," he replied, his voice smooth but deliberate. "It's whether America is ready for a leader who thinks differently." The room erupted into gasps. Barron had turned the question back on Eleanor, challenging the very idea of what leadership could be. It wasn't about him, it was about whether the world was ready to accept a different kind of leadership, one that didn't rely on tradition or legacy. As the cameras stopped rolling and the interview concluded, the crowd was left in stunned silence. Barron Trump had done what few could have imagined. He had entered the spotlight not with arrogance, but with a quiet assurance that commanded respect. He had reshaped the conversation, defined the terms of the debate, and left everyone wondering what would come next. The media buzzed with reactions. Some hailed him as a visionary, while others questioned his motivations. But one thing was clear: Barron Trump had made his presence known. He wasn't just the son of his father. He was Barron Trump, a force to be reckoned with. The interview had set the stage for something much bigger. Barron had not just answered questions, he had rewritten the script. The world was watching, and Barron Trump had proven that he wasn't just a bystander in his own life. He was the one shaping the future, and this was just the beginning. As the interview concluded and the cameras powered off, the world was still buzzing with Barron Trump's powerful response. What started as an interrogation about legacy and family quickly turned into an unforgettable moment of strength and self-definition. Barron had done something few expected: he had taken control of the conversation, redefining his own narrative, and leaving an indelible mark on the public's mind. The media was left to digest the implications of his words. The questions they had asked him for years had been turned back on them, and in a way, Barron had emerged as not just the son of his father but a force in his own right. What's next for Barron Trump? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: he's no longer the shadow of a legacy, he's a name that stands on its own. If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with all our future content. Don't forget to drop a comment below. What do you think about Barron's shift in the conversation? Was his response a game changer? Let's discuss.